There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Camille Beatty Falor. She is the Vice President of Sales over at eventcore. Camille, how's it going today?
It's a beautiful sunny day in Seattle.
Those sunny days tend to happen a little bit more out here in Colorado than in Seattle, from what I've told anyway. But Camille, I am glad that you're joining me on a sunny day, and hopefully it's sunny when our listeners are hearing this. We're going to be talking about using very customized, personalized communication across all three sectors of your go-to-market team, from marketing to sales to customer success, in your case, delivery over at eventcore. But before we jump into that, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about what you and the team are up to and your background a little bit.
Thank you so much, Logan. So my background is in sales. I've been in some sort of sales role for the last 28 years. The last 10 of them, I've been selling software of different iterations, both custom and SaaS. So selling, and more selling. eventcore itself is an organization. It's located in Seattle. We make custom event registration software, which is a somewhat niche market. We especially try to work with people who have complex or white glove events that require just a little bit more extra TLC than a more traditional type of event.
I love it. That's great context, because we're going to be talking about, when you need to deliver a custom experience, how do you customize your language, your messaging, and your communication between all of the functional roles that are going to be interacting with prospects and with customers. And so I think folks listening to this, whether they lead a sales, marketing, or a CS team, even if they're not in custom event software, if they are selling something custom, software or service, there are going to be things they'll be able to take from this. So let's start with marketing, since they're usually the first function to whose communication is going to reach the end user, and not even an end user yet, a prospect. It seems like everyone we're talking to these days is at least trying to start an account-based pilot, or in your case, is more account-based on the whole, just to begin with. So tell us a little bit about how you guys manage scale and personalization from that marketing communication standpoint.
So we're a small company, and balancing the need to have a scalable outreach process with the need to have something that's very personalized was something we took very seriously. So of course, as with many people, we're adopting the account-based philosophy. And we work very hard to understand our prospects before we reach out to them. So all of the communication that's going to them has an element of the personal included in it. For example, we have a prospect who really likes cheese. And it just so happens that we recently found an article about cheese. So we were able to understand that person's perspective and their love of cheese through LinkedIn, which is so funny that you can learn things like that about someone on LinkedIn. And then we were able to craft an email that included both the reflection of their love of cheese, the article about cheese, and then transition it into, hey, here's a reason why we should get together and talk. And that kind of not lengthy, but very personalized communication is successful for us. It allows us to have a more immediate personal connection with the prospect than, say, a bulk email or something that's very sort of scattershot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you guys are looking at those opportunities, who's kind of leading the charge in finding those personalization pieces? Is it your BDR, SDR team doing research on primarily LinkedIn, which I know is kind of go to number one for most of us that are in B2B?
So we're not SaaS, so we don't have a BDR team at all. It's all done by the AEs. The majority of our business starts with referral. So we have a very large referral inbound lead network for relationships. And then we exponentiate off of referrals with introductions. And that is where we get the connectivity between, hey, this person is introducing us to this person. So it makes it relatively straightforward to identify targets. After the target is identified, it's that getting them to engage with us step that has always been a challenge. And that's why we implemented this more focused approach to speaking with or reaching out to people.
Yeah, I love it. So as we make that transition from the messaging that marketing is helping with on the front end, you've got sales who are walking customers through a longer sales cycle in a custom software type of environment. I imagine that in that sort of environment, again, to the personalized approach, it's much less, okay, you need to know these 3 ticks of every demo, and your salespeople almost become pre-customer success, or in your case, what you guys call delivery, pre-delivery, because they need to be asking questions, not just to qualify the pain, but to figure out what is the delivery team going to deliver, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly true. And in our industry, there has to be some sort of compelling reason to move forward. That's the most pivotal portion of us obtaining new business. So when we are beginning to enter into conversation beyond that pre-sales type of conversation, all of the behaviors that great salespeople need to have are still required. There's still good question asking, excellent listening, seeking to understand the needs of the client, and all those more traditional sales behaviors. It's the application of those to our particular product and deliverable that becomes more specific. So we first seek to understand their organization. What are the goals of their organization with the event that they're holding? Who is the audience? What is the messaging that they want that audience to see when they are going through their registration process to attend the event? What that means is that while we are, through our demonstrating and our selling, trying to represent the value proposition of working with both a custom software company and someone who's got a higher price point, we also need to understand when we are delivering for them what makes it custom. So to do that, throughout the entire sales process, we continue to refine and refine and refine the specifications. And we also include delivery at a pretty early point in the sales process. So we already know a lot about the client or the prospect from pre-sales. We translate that into a deeper understanding of their organizational purpose and the purpose of the event that they're holding. And then we get an initial set of specifications. And then we start to include the lead project portfolio manager at eventcore. And she helps us go from a pretty good landscape to a very detailed level of specification about what we need to build for the client. And that communication from pre-sales to closed deal is completely predicated on how well we do a job gathering the specifications and understanding the client.
Today's growth story centers around Exactly, a SaaS company that helps enterprise companies with their incentive compensation. They'd worked with search marketing agencies in the past, but they'd had issues with transparency and ROI. They wanted to improve net new leads via their organic and paid search channels, so they reached out to Directive. Optimizing search engine market share for Exactly was the top priority. Directive did this by improving search engine visibility for target audiences at the bottom of the funnel. In order to generate qualified leads, they focused on value-driven content on relevant, winnable terms, landing page testing on PPC platforms, and a laser focus on third-party directory optimization, specifically Capterra. Directive grew sales accepted lead volume by 100%, increased Capterra conversion volume by 336%, and boosted pre-qualified clicks to Capterra by 39%. If you're looking for results like this with your search engine marketing, there's a good chance Directive can help. Visit directiveconsulting.com and get a free customized proposal. All right, let's get back to the show.
I've heard John Barrows and other sales leaders talk about this recently that, I think it was from Jake Dunlap most recently as well. You don't have a closing problem. You have a qualification problem. If you're not qualifying well, then you're not going to close well. Those are going to be directly correlated. And I hear that in what you're saying here as well. It's something that you mentioned there, Camille, about bringing your delivery team alongside your salespeople in the sales process very early reminds me of something we talked about in a previous episode with Matt Gingrich over at Bombora. They kind of flipped the language around their trials and turned them into pilots, which meant bringing customer success in alongside sales earlier. Tell us a little bit about how that dynamic works. What are maybe some of the potential pitfalls when it makes sense to have those two functions tag team together earlier in the sales process, but the dynamic can be interesting, can be challenging if you don't set it up the right way, I'm assuming, right?
That's very true. So I've been at eventcore for about a year. And when I started here, a large portion of the sales process included a massive demo download with a lot of very heavy detail, and it might take as long as an hour. So we made two pivots based on what you just said. When we do demonstrations for people, they're very targeted. These are the things we know are important to the client from listening to them. We specifically focus on those 3 to 5 elements. So instead of here is how you A to Z register, here's how we do the type of invitations you're looking for. Here's how we handle payments, and here's how we do our reporting. So that we are speaking to the things that are elementally important to the client or prospect, as well as reinforcing we've heard what they had to say. And then when we include the delivery person, those conversations sound like this. We understand you want to do fill in the blank feature. How do you want that to look for your attendee when they go through the registration process? And then we have them describe it. And then our specification or our project portfolio manager is able to describe how that would work at a granular level. So we're listening to them, reflecting that we understood, listening again, reflecting to them that we understood, and then representing that understanding in the proposal so that when they're signing that contract, they are seeing things that nothing is a surprise. They know exactly what they want to get. And having delivery involved in that conversation means that when it rolls through delivery, we're more likely to have a successful engagement with the client.
Yeah, absolutely. In cases that are maybe a little bit higher volume sale, not necessarily quite as customized, you can do some things to get sales and customer success or delivery on the same page. For instance, at Sweetfish here, we use Chorus.ai as a call recorder and call transcriber. And I've found that just sharing entire calls or snippets of calls with prospects that become customers with our producer team, which is our equivalent of your delivery team, there's less that is lost in translation, right? In having to shift those conversations over and explain what was said and what was the intent and those sorts of things. You guys have the advantage of delivery being involved in those conversations earlier because you've set it up that way. It's not like, oh, you have that advantage because it's just happens to be that way. But let's talk about delivery in how they take it to the final step in the presentation and the actual delivery and execution to still deliver on that custom communication that we've been talking about all the way through the buyer journey here today.
All right, so 73% of the eventcore organization is dedicated to delivery, which is, in my opinion, a ridiculously high percentage. So we automatically include certain things in any build that we're doing. So we always have a technical lead and we always have a client-focused lead. So the client always has someone advocating for them internally as a human being. And then they also always have a technical lead who understands the entire scope of their project and then manages the sub-technical delivery, like who's the web producer, who's the developer, and so forth. So instead of being oh, great, I gave him the specifications, I hope it comes out okay. What they're getting is every step of the way, here's what we're doing. And then we're very deliberate about our QA and our review process so that the client always feels involved. It's a buzzy word to use. We focus on that collaboration between what the client wants and what we can deliver. And it's great. Usually the client feels engaged and listened to, and then we're able to deliver something really fantastic. The pitfall is that when that communication is not done well, the product isn't really what it needs to be. The client feels unheard. And attrition is a big problem with any software company. So the better job we do understanding the client, the lower our attrition rate. So there's so many business reasons to implement good listening. And we've all heard about it since kindergarten, that your ears should be open more than your mouth.
Yep, absolutely. One of my favorite TED Talks of all time is 10 Ways to Have Better Conversations. I'm blanking now on who gave that TED Talk, but she also wrote a book on communication style. I'll find that and I'll put it in the show notes after we're done here. But one of the things she said is forget the things like have interesting questions to ask, pretend like you're paying attention. And the crux was, if you're paying attention, you won't need to make it look like you're paying attention. So the more that we can train marketing, sales, and customer success to actually pay attention, be good listeners, then that personalized communication and everybody being on the same page is going to happen. But if it doesn't start there, you can't document a conversation where the customer was actually, prompted to give you the good information that you need to deliver on if that didn't happen in the first place. So before we focus on those handoffs, we have to train everyone to be good listeners, and that informs that personalized communication. So that's what you've got me thinking about today, Camille. So thank you so much for unpacking it that way. Before we wrap up, I love to ask a lot of our guests this question, since one of our core values here at Sweetfish is never stop learning. I would love to hear either a personal or professional development resource that you've been recommending, maybe to colleagues, friends, anybody who will listen these days.
So I have kind of an older one that I feel is very tried and true. It's the Lominger competencies, which is a series of leadership development competencies that help people grow. There's a pretty cool process for identifying certain competencies that would be valuable to you to improve. An example of a competency would be dealing with ambiguity, which is something that's very hard for salespeople. But the one that you made me think of today has to do with authenticity. And that's part of the listening competency, is that listening has to be something that you're authentically engaged in, because if you're not, then you're not really listening. So I would recommend the Lominger competencies. It's a pretty cool tool.
Awesome. I love it, Camille. We'll try to link to that in the show notes as well.
Okay,
so thank
cool.
you so much for adding some value in helping us think about personalized communication across all go-to-market functions, dropping some knowledge here with a great resource. If anybody listening to this, Camille, would like to ask any follow-up questions, maybe they're an event marketer and they want to pick your brain about some best practices, or just follow up on this conversation to chat a little bit more, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Oh, I would be grateful for anyone who wishes to contact me. The best way to do that is through LinkedIn, like most of us, I'm sure, but I'd be grateful for any conversation. I love to learn from other people too.
I love it. My LinkedIn network is one of my great sources of encouragement and definitely knowledge as we continue to try to never stop learning here at Sweetfish. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Camille. I really appreciate it.
That was really great, Logan. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Oh, I guess timing probably doesn't matter, but have a great time.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.